Hello and welcome to the Westerville City School podcast, We Are the Ville. This podcast will take you behind the scenes of Westerville City Schools and show you the ins and outs of how our school operates and the great kids we have. I'm your host, Melanie Amato. We begin in 1950. Television became the dominant form of entertainment, replacing radio. The birth of rock and roll music began with the rise of artists like Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry, and Mickey Mouse got his home with the first Disneyland theme park opening in 1955. Back here in Central Ohio, we were also seeing something big happening: growth. But first, a recap of how we got here. Please welcome back Chief Personnel and Policy Officer, Scott Reeves. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Melanie. How you doing? Looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. So let's just kind of recap for the audience here. How did we get into 1950?
Well, just recapping very broadly, most schools were grounded in the foundation. Genoa Township Schools, Blendon Township Schools, Sharon Township, on and on. Within those townships, you had towns that were growing and annexing parts of the township, like Westerville or like Worthington and Sharon. And as they began to grow, their city schools began to grow. Parallel with Blendon Township, Westerville was growing. And even when we had Hanby built, we only had two schools, which was Emerson and Hanby. Mm-hmm. We didn't get Longfellow until 1931. So there were still several township schools in and around Blendon that belonged to Blendon Township Schools. But eventually, the township schools went away, mm-hmm. and they just absorbed into the local town. So in 1923, we had annexed parts of Sharon Township. We also, in 1928, absorbed all of the southern part of Genoa Township, which we continue to serve. By the time we get to 1949, really close to the 1950, we had all of Sharon Township schools get divided between Westerville and Worthington. Minerva Park, who had always sent their secondary kids through trolley up to Hanby when it was mm-hmm. junior, senior high school, Minerva Park just fully came into Westerville Schools in 1949 when we got the eastern part of Sharon Township. So we began to grow beyond the need for Hanby, Emerson, Longfellow. Right after bringing in Sharon Township and Minerva Park, we built Whittier in 1952. So we were starting to get growth. And then in 1955, we brought all of Blendon Township in, which started the explosive growth over the next decade and a half for Westerville Schools.
Now, were all those schools a K through 12, or were they just kind of what we would call elementary, middle school
Most
today?
of the one-room schoolhouses around. There was one near Bob Evans where the district office is now, burnt to the ground. We talked about that. There was one mm-hmm. down by where the Waffle House is. There were several all around on Hempstead. And then we had Central College that was built. And for a while, Westerville had the rival town of Almathea, which no longer exists. The only remnants of it are East Street and North Street of mm-hmm. Almathea. And so they had Central College within Blendon Township. And so for the most part, they were K-8. Compulsory school education then wasn't what it was mm-hmm. now. And then you had Westerville charging tuition for kids living outside the bounds of Westerville schools to go to Hanby Junior Senior High for secondary.
Okay. So we still wouldn't have
or Westerville Junior Senior High.
Yeah. So we still wouldn't have like a 7-year-old in class with a 15-year-old back then, would we? Or was it a little bit more separate?
Not so much in Westerville, because we had started to be more structured. But you could have had a one-room schoolhouse over there on Hempstead or down by 161 or Cherry Bottom that could have housed a great variety of ages of kids.
Okay. So we have Longfellow mm-hmm. and Whittier, but we still don't have like a high school. So when did that come about?
Well, when Hanby was built, it was a junior senior high school.
Okay.
It was built specifically for secondary kids at the time of being the junior senior high school. When Longfellow was built, I want to say that's when they decided to name schools after poets and all of that, and changed Vine Street School to Emerson and Longfellow, mm-hmm. two of the big writers of the day. But what is now Hanby was the Westerville Junior Senior High School, and it remained that way for, 23 or 30 some years.
Wow. So we have still standing, the very first high school in Westerville. But it wasn't called the same thing it is now. Can you give us a history about that?
Well, when you had the consolidation of all of the townships surrounding us, Southern Genoa, Eastern Sharon, all of Blendon Township, what we discovered was the schools that we had were no longer sufficient for the students that we just acquired. And there was great conversation about building a larger facility to house secondary students, turn Westerville High School into an elementary school, maybe even partially some middle school age kids. And so they did that. It was interesting. A former board member, Rick Villardo, kind of said he mentioned at one board meeting a former board member that had just passed away, and that's why he mentioned him. And that board member was on the board that determined to build the building we're in now, which is what we call Westerville South High School. And he said they took great flack for building a high school out of town. Remember Rick said that?
And he was right.
Yeah, that they took a lot of flack. Now, in fairness, Westerville South is really just across State Street from where Longfellow was. It's not that much further from Longfellow, but when Longfellow was built, it was out of town. Stretching towards the south, which is where the growth connecting to the capital city was. So, but it wasn't when they built. It opened in 1960, which means they probably started planning and building for it as soon as all of Blendon Township came in 1955. And it was also named after an author poet. It was James Russell Lowell High School, but that name didn't stick. I'm still trying to find a James Russell Lowell T-shirt to kind of wear around. But yes, it was built and opened in 1960 because of the immense consolidation that kick-started our growth.
So James Russell High School, Lowell High School, aka South, was built in 1960. And what other schools came after that? Because like you said, the growth we took all of Blendon Township and, the growth was happening. And so we needed more schools.
Yes. And what was happening in Westerville was indicative of what was happening in Worthington and it was indicative of what was happening to the capital city of Columbus. There was a tremendous amount of population growth in the area, both just from people migrating here, people migrating up from the south, still immigrants coming in from Europe, and Columbus itself as a metropolitan area was exploding. So very quickly after South was built, we had to build it was not big enough to be a junior senior high school, and we needed a junior high school. And so down the street from on Walnut, we built on the corner of Walnut and Spring, Walnut Springs Middle School, junior high then. And Walnut Springs opened in 65, which means they virtually started planning it after South opened to realize that this wasn't big enough to be a junior senior high. Immediately following that, in the neighborhood that started to develop around South, we built Charrington. And as soon as the paint dried on Walnut Springs, the growth was so much that in and of itself was not sufficient to be our only junior high, and we built Blendon. I mean, as soon as Walnut Springs opened, they would have had to start planning for Blendon, which opened in 1969, and not too long ago had their 50th anniversary for their opening. But then on the heels of Blendon, we opened Amherst to service the kids in the Sharon Township area that we had. That was serviced by meager one-room schoolhouses, but we opened the Amherst neighborhood, got fully developed, and we opened a school there. We opened Point View, very near where our district office is now, because that southern portion of Westerville, the city of Westerville itself, was annexing into Blendon Township territories and expanding, and subdivisions being built. So we built Point View, and then we built our twins, Robert Frost and Mark Twain, that we were able to build in those areas. And Robert Frost would have been in 1974 an area that was sparsely populated, but on county line. But we knew that was coming, and even then in the 1950s, we rebuilt Hawthorne. Hawthorne was built around 57-ish in Minerva Park, because what was there previously, plus Minerva Park Elementary School on Cleveland Avenue, just wasn't sufficient to hold that area of town. So we had, within an 11-year period, we built 9 schools.
Wow.
And that's almost an unprecedented growth for any school district in Ohio, including Olentangy now.
And you called Mark Twain and Robert Frost twins. Does that mean their building layouts are exactly the same?
Yep, and that's just economical. When you're saying, hey, we need a couple elementary schools, let's get an architect in, let's get a design in, and we've done that a couple of times. We've done that with Twain and Frost. We did it with Alcott and Faust, and we did it with Wilder and McVeigh. So we've done that 3 times where we've used the same design to build schools. It was just more cost effective.
So we have all these schools built because of the growth that was happening, but then all of a sudden, it all comes to a stop.
Yep. It all comes to a stop right about the time that we built and opened what became Westerville North and turned Westerville High School into Westerville South. Westerville North opened in '75, the fall of '75. And that means they started planning it in 72, 71. And that was right at the time when, like the other townships around, Genoa Township absorbed into, Sharon Township did, Blendon Township absorbed into, Mifflin Township to our south was faltering. And half of Mifflin Township was either Columbus City or Gahanna. But the part that was still township just could not financially continue to go. And Mifflin's turn of events had a dramatic impact on Westerville schools.
And that's where we'll pick up on our next episode. So stay tuned. But until then, thank you, Mr. Scott Reeves.
Thank you for having me.